Titus, we can't hear you, Titus.
Hello.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to this event. This is Kikao Junction, a dynamic platform by Forum Civ, Hub East and Southern Africa, a platform where we dialogue to get locally driven solutions, oriented reflections, co-learning, as well as mapping out alternative responses to the challenges that face our region. So our focus today is on education and literacy as we mark this year's International Literacy Day. The International Literacy Day is celebrated every 8th of September since 1966. And this is just to remind us and the international community of the importance of literacy for individuals, communities, and societies, and the need for intensified efforts towards a more literate society. So it said that you deny a man an education, and thereafter you can deny him anything else on the basis that he's not educated. Education is not only a fundamental human right, but it's an enabling right with a direct impact on the realization of all other human rights. The COVID-19 pandemic, we all know, has created a disruption to the education system, and this is the largest disruption in history. The UN estimates that about 1.6 billion learners in more than 190 countries have been affected. And you know, at the initial phase of the pandemic, schools were closed. And at the peak of the pandemic, about 63 million primary and secondary teachers were disrupted from the learning process. Here in Kenya, you realize that the schools were closed abruptly in March, and this has disrupted learning for an estimated 17 million learners. So will learners repeat, or will they continue with where they left? Those are some of the questions. And I would want to invite you as we indulge on the topic of discussion today, which is learning for life, leave no one behind, literacy in the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. Of course, you can follow us on social media platforms through the hashtag Literacy Day 2020. And to help us put the discussion in perspective, we are honored to have a panel of discussants who are education experts in their own right. As stakeholders, they play a key role in providing the impetus to the delivery of quality education for all. So please help me welcome them. And I'd wish to start with Dr. Wanjiru.
Yes, thank you, Titus. Yes, my name is Dr. Wanjiru Kariuki, as you have been told. I'm the Education Secretary in the State Department for Post-Training and Skills Development in the Ministry of Education.
Thank you. Then we can go to Mr. Jimford Mokwa.
Thank you, Titus. My name is Jimford Mokwa. I'm the County Director of Adult and Continuing Education Nakuru, and I'm happy to be part of this very important panel that discusses adult education and beyond in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Then we have Amos.
So thank you and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you're joining in from. My name is Amos Kaburu. I work at the People's Action for Learning Network, called PAL Network, which is a partnership of 15 organizations spread across 14 countries who envision a world where all children have a foundation for lifelong learning. I'm in charge of advocacy and action initiatives at the network. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amos. Alice. Alice, I think you're muted.
Thank you, Titus. I'm Rakoi Alice, an instructor from Suswa Narok. We are 14 instructors, and we are doing adult education, both in Suswa and Nakuru County. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we proceed to, finally we have Isaac.
Good morning, good evening. Thank you so much, Titus, for inviting me to this important discussion. Isaac Mwema Kema is my name. I work with the International Labour Organization as a national program coordinator, managing the inclusive growth through decent work in the Great Rift, which is a program we are co-implementing with the Forum CIV, with the public-private development partnership approach. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And again, a warm welcome to you all. And we'll now get straight to our discussions. And to kick off this discussion, it's estimated that about 700 million adults and young people lack the basic literacy skills, and more than 600 million children and adolescents are not achieving minimum proficiency levels in reading and mathematics. That's by UNESCO. Amos, what is the impact of COVID-19 on this statistic and in achieving lifelong learning?
Thank you so much, Titus. As you correctly pointed out, when someone denies you an opportunity to read, it's very difficult for you. Of course, reading also has two components. There is what is the facial reading, but there's also the depth of what Paulo Freire writes in Pedagogy for the Oppressed, and saying that true or meaningful education is one in which they not only know how to read the word, but they also read the world. That is what will give them an opportunity for them to live and thrive, because that is the greatest right. After the right to life is the right to self-determination. So if we deny you an opportunity to read the word that is supposed to support you to read the world, then I think it is the worst crime against humanity. Now, as you correctly pointed out on what the statistics indicate, 700 million people is close to 10% of the world's population. Of course, when you look at it as adults, you'll be talking about more than 20%. If you bring this closer home to contexts such as ours, you see that there is a very good nexus between illiteracy, poverty, exclusion, and thriving. And if you take the census results for last year, they will indicate to you that areas such as Turkana North, we have got more than 90% of the people who are illiterate. They have never been to school, because in any way we have used schools as the form through which we provide literacy programs. So when schooling opportunities are minimized, then you realize that those people are living in extreme poverty. In a recent study that us at PAL Network we conducted, when COVID started, and now taking it to new forms of literacy that include digital literacy, you realize that a household that is headed by a woman who does not have a mobile phone is 6 times more vulnerable than a household headed by a man with a mobile phone. And this is like in a situation such as Turkana. So you're looking at that nexus of poverty, inequality, as well as poverty that is thriving. So what COVID has done is that it already found when our systems were so nimble, our systems were weak. And therefore what COVID has done is just be like what you call the proverbial last nail on the coffin, that now such groups are even more vulnerable. So as we think of redesigning education in the new context, we must really rethink in equity as far as the delivery of education programs is concerned. It cannot just be equality, that we are reopening schools and everyone is going back to where they were, but we really have to rethink of these areas where children were extremely left behind. My daughter is just enjoying her lessons here like nothing is ongoing, because she has access to high-speed internet. She has got access to a good processor kind of laptop. And I'm having the other one. What about that child in Turkana? What about that child in Kajiado? What about that other child, including her own cousins who are just in places such as Kakamega, and they don't have such opportunities? So we must be very, very deliberate that COVID is going to serve as a very good excuse for many governments and states which have refused to deal with the problem of inequality. But we must really press to ensure that these rights to literacy, which is the right to self-determination, is never abrogated at any given time by the state. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amos. Bringing into perspective very weighty discussions on equality, equity, and technology. But just staying on the same line, Daktari, the learning losses due to COVID-19 are threatening to extend beyond this generation, as Amos has ably put it, and this will erase decades of progress. What impact is this likely to have on post-training skills and development?
Thank you, Titus. I think Amos has really attacked the state, and I want to defend it. The COVID-19 pandemic has been very rough on the education sector. In terms of issues to do with access, quality, and equity, there's a lot of negative impact. With regard to access, you find that when learners are out of school and they're not learning, of course, there's going to be a risk to access to quality education. But on the flip side, what we are seeing is that innovative learning methodology has come out. For example, remote learning, distance learning, and so forth. And therefore, this is enhancing access to education to a certain degree. In terms of quality, again, we are seeing that the learning environment requires that the learners and the trainers have a safe learning environment. Without this, then the quality of education will be compromised. And therefore, precautions have to be taken to ensure that learners and trainers do not get COVID. And when they do, they are not stigmatized. With regard to access, and that's the issue Amos has really emphasized, I agree with him. Where we have vulnerable learners or learners who are at risk, refugees, disabled, girls or people coming from rural and poverty backgrounds, there's a risk of dropping out. The retention and participation rates are likely to go down. And even again, as we talk about e-learning, the digital divide will also be a problem. So we acknowledge that vulnerable learners will have a problem. Again, there's also the increased vulnerability. It's bad enough that they're vulnerable, but it's worse now that the COVID is there. So that you find that the education ecosystem normally provides nutrition and food for some of these learners. And therefore, when they go home, they're at risk. And we are seeing a lot of gender-based violence now in the homes, drug and substance abuse and so forth. So increased vulnerability has taken place. And therefore, when we talk about our constitution, our sessional papers, SDG 4, we are saying that there's going to be a challenge in achieving access to quality education. But the government has been very strong in responding to the COVID pandemic. You're aware that when the first case of COVID came in 13th March of 2020, 3 days later, the government closed education institutions to prevent the transmission of the virus. And thereafter, we have seen remote learning, provision of lessons and digital content through radio, television, Zoom, webinars, the Kenya Education Cloud. And more recently, we are having community learning, where we are engaging learners in the environs during the COVID pandemic. And just to add on, we also have the Kenya Basic Education COVID-19 Emergency Response Plan. This one is on the Ministry of Education website, and it was created to deal with the pandemic. We also had a committee that was established thereafter, made up of education stakeholders, that came up with a report on the reopening of schools. And more recently, COVID-19 guidelines have been developed to prepare for the reopening of schools. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Daktari. An effort to really sort of put things into perspective in terms of how government is responding to it. And thank you very much. I think I want to shift to Mr. Jimford and help us understand what has been the impact of COVID-19 crisis on the youth and adult literacy educators in delivering teaching and learning. Amidst all these issues that have been mentioned, there's been what the government is putting in to leverage technology, but what is the impact of COVID-19?
Thank you. As Daktari has put it, the impact, first of all, let us put it into perspective. Immediately after the pandemic was declared and the first case was announced by His Excellency the President, you are aware that on 15th March, the schools were closed. Adult education institutions were not spared, and they all went home. And that is where I tend to think I need to look at that impact, because majority of the people that we handle are the out-of-school youths, adults, the vulnerables, and hard to reach the section of the Kenyans. Since the time the schools, the learning institutions were closed, it should be appreciated that majority of the adult learners are also parents, and being parents, they had to burden the two juggles, that of taking care of the children at home and also that of trying to ensure that the protocols spelled out by the Ministry of Education are also observed. But in the education itself is that the learning stopped, and after the stopping of the learning processes was done, it means that a majority of our learners have sort of relapsed to illiteracy, because adults also, they need to provide for their children, they need to provide, there are very many things in the society. So the response has been that, as the Directorate of Adult Education, as Daktari was putting it, we also had to come with a COVID response, where we received quite a number of circulars from the ministry, in which we had to collect the data, the number of the institutions that were closed, the number of the learners that were there during that particular period of time. And this data had to be collected and sent to the ministry quarters for purposes of coming with appropriate response mechanism that would see that once the centers will be opened and observing the protocols, then the learning process resumes. So the impact has been great in that actually, if there are no running, and the most of the learners are also taking other courses because the youths need to participate on getting day-to-day living livelihood, then it meant that these learners are actually now giving education a second thought. What I wanted to add is that in every society, as Mandela put it, is that if you want to kill a nation, you don't have to give them bombs. If you want to kill a nation, it's not about giving them grenades. If you want to kill a nation, you simply deny the people an opportunity to get education, and the nation is dead. But the impact with the appropriate response, I tend to think we will be able to catch up, because it was global. And as the cabinet secretary was putting it the other day, is that dead people don't go to school. It is only those ones who are alive who have to go to school. So life took a precedence over education. Thank you.
Asante, Jim Ford, I think putting forward a very clear direction in terms of the ethical dilemma with regard to dead people not going to school. But we have Alice. Alice is one of the adult instructors at community level. I would want us to, or just want her to get us into perspective. At community level, how has the pandemic affected the learning process, and so far, considering the momentum that they had gained? Alice.
Thank you, Titus. the pandemic has really affected our community very much. For once, since it stopped, some of our parents has started knowing how to read and write. And some of them started applying that small knowledge into their small income generating projects. For instance, most of our parents know how to do this beadwork. They can now recognize writing letters. If maybe you give them a shanga, they work and then you tell them, write for me this name. They can recognize letters. Now this pandemic has really affected them because where they were saying now they could be, wamerudi nyuma tena. So it has really affected our community. Again, we have not stopped with our income generating projects. They are still going on. Although they are eagerly waiting for that moment which schools will be open so that they can proceed with the education. Another thing, I thank the directors because they have accessed our centers, and we hopefully think that they are going to let us continue with the education. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. I think a very clear connection in terms of livelihood, economic benefits, like Amos, you ably put it at the beginning. So I think, Isaac, you can perhaps also help put things in perspective, because the disruption of learning is likely to have an impact on the quality of learning and skills. How does this interface with the world of work?
Thank you, Titus. I really congratulate the colleagues who have just spoken before me, because we can feel the departure where we are coming from. And I go by the theme that we should not leave anyone behind. And the question that you're putting on table, that how then do we look or view this perspective, this scenario from the employment perspective, and issues to do with skills and all that. From our side, you really understand that COVID-19 has brought a lot of complexity. I really like what Dr. Wanjiru has said. And we are looking at the issues of advanced complex organizational reorganization. We have issues to do with knowledge management and knowledge requirements. We are looking at also sophisticated technological emergencies, which we need to readjust to. And this, for us to make a meaningful economical growth, such improvements need to happen in a holistic manner, where probably we are looking both at the current generation that we are building skills, and also the adults, talking about different brackets. If you look at the data or the literacy rate that has been presented by UNESCO, they have categorized ages bracket in terms of the groups we classify for adult literacy. And so looking at skills, you'll agree with me, with this increasingly demands to depend on the degree of literacy and education attainment for our population, for us to be able to predispose people to acquire skills that can enhance experience. And this can come either at informal level or formal education and training. And so for literacy training or literacy education, we need to look at it from that angle. What technology has brought on board? I am happy when the manager, one of the colleague, the panelists, has said that he has 2 children who are studying. We see a trend whereby we have an increasing rate of technological advancement and acquaintance by our children, who are even getting more knowledgeable about technology than some of us. And we need to go beyond the norm and expose the entire population, like I've said, in terms of acquainting themselves with this technology and the emerging trends. So then when we are talking about skills, when you're talking about employment, when you're talking about preparation for the labor market, at all levels, I've said right from the informal and also formal, then they are fully prepared. Is it the way of doing or conducting trainings or lessons from home via technology? Is it any kind of platform that would be brought to us by technology? COVID-19 has come to expose us to this, and back in 2019, moderator and our viewers, the International Labour Organization celebrated its 100 years, the so-called centenary celebration. And one of the things that we were very keen to discuss was the issues about the future of work. We never knew that COVID-19 would come and expose employment sector or labor sector to such trends, whereby we need to prepare all the workers, all the labor sectors in terms of adjusting to technology. Globalization has come with all its challenges. But before even we could prepare for this as a country, then COVID-19 came, and we can see the kind of readjustments, and people, even organizational level, and even at the education sector, like Dr. Wanjiru has said, reprioritizing, reorganizing, so then we can adjust to the current environment. That is what I would say. We need to prepare ourselves to adopt or to, come into the new systems or trends which are being exposed to us by the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isaac, and the panelists for engaging us in that discussion. And I think it's very easy to get lost in the statistics. The 700 million that we are talking about, the 17 million learners who are out of school at the moment as we speak, and of course that cuts across the primary level and universities and colleges. So, but perhaps what do all these statistics mean for us in real life? Amos, you alluded to the fact about Kakamega, the digital divide, as Daktari mentioned it. But what does this statistic mean in real life?
Thank you so much, Titus. I'll paint two scenarios to bring this into context. One, that we are here to see the impact of COVID-19 on education. Forget about what we are seeing right now. This is child play. We cannot use the short-term effects that we are looking at right now to quantify what are going to be the impact. And I don't think that as a country, we are appreciating the magnitude of what COVID-19 is going to do to our education, and largely what is going to do to our economy and life in general, because we seem really to have reduced this COVID-19 discussion into just a mere question of life and even forget about livelihoods. In other words, for instance, you're telling people that they should stay in the house and die of hunger rather than going out to die of COVID. I mean, this is a big contradiction. Now, there is a fundamental question that we have to ask. Why is it that ballot papers reach Kibish, but education cannot reach Kibish? Why is it that KCP, we can lift it using aeroplanes and everything, and make everyone sit for those exams, even from their hospital bed, but we cannot give them? Why aren't we seeing the same zeal and obsession around delivering technology and these opportunities to everyone the same way we deliver ballot papers? It speaks to the design of our policy. It speaks to the design of what we think around inclusion and marginalization in this particular country. There is even a bigger problem that our policy making has one existential challenge. It is very input driven. And listen to any policy maker talking, they'll give you statistics around input. We have delivered this number of laptops, we have developed this number of COVID responses, but they never seek to ask the question, how many children have been reached by these COVID responses? They'll keep on reading for you the numbers, and we have done this, we will give them more desks. But nobody seeks to ask the question, what does it mean for these 700 million people? What is it about these 3 million children who are in Tana River, who are in Kajiado, let alone even those who are just in an informal settlement next to where all of us could be living, because in any surrounding suburb, there must be an informal settlement. Nobody seeks to ask the question. So we must rethink the art of our policy making, that our policy making should be outcome driven as opposed to being input driven. Don't just ask about the number of desks that you'll be delivering, but start with the question, what does it mean? And I like what my colleague from ILO has said. We have to rethink what is the future of work in the world of work that these people are going to compete in. As we sleep right now without looking at the three forms of effects that COVID has brought, the short term, the mid-term, and the long term, and begin to reorient our system towards delivering a more resilient education, other people are doing it. China, Wuhan, is already back to its feet and delivering everything. As we are still squibbling with Tanzania whether our flights can go there or not, Rwanda has already taken over that space. So it is the same thing that is also going to happen to our education. As our fragile system keeps on collapsing, other people will be taking advantage of it. So even the little competitiveness that we had is being washed away every single day, simply because our policies are so complacent to the changing. And therefore, the question you've asked, Titus, what does it therefore mean? The first fundamental thing to do is to take education to the people. People have the right to self-determination. We must see a more increased devolution of education. Where are the county governments in this conversation? Why have we reduced conversation around COVID to Jogo House? Jogo House does not have the monopoly of the ideas. Has Jogo House harvested the ideas that we have? So can we begin now to see a discussion around giving communities and households a bigger say in the education of their children? Parents have been educating their children for the last 7 months. Why are you now telling me that I again should give you my children in January for you again to continue doing what you always did? And yet the statistics that Titus, you and I began collecting this data in 2009, 10% of those who are leaving class 8 can still not do class 2 work. So you still want me again to trust you with my children to continue doing the same in January? Honestly, we must begin to unpackage these numbers and ask who is most vulnerable, who is most affected, and begin to address their needs at the point of concern. The same way you use aeroplanes to deliver KCP papers, the same way you do everything possible to deliver ballot papers, we must be equally deliberate to ensure that this 10%, this 20%, this 40% in those areas are getting a meaningful education. It is not just about Bora Elimu. It must be Elimu Bora. Thank you.
Thank you, Amos.
I could like to interject.
Yes.
Hello, Titus.
Yes, go ahead,
Yes.
Jim.
I like this. I like the seal in which my colleague is really approaching this issue. But I would like us not to lose the original statement that you asked. Where are the 700 and over about 800 million Kenyan people in the globe are? What I wanted to put across to him is that we are losing the discussion because we seem to overemphasize on only children below who are school-going children. We are not talking of the adults who are illiterate, or the youths who are illiterate, who are not in the formal education system. And these people are very, very, very critical in the society. They are the ones who are engaged in day-to-day struggling to make their ends meet. But they do not have quality education. Nobody cares about these people on how they access education. If you look at the, I'm not trying to defend the government or to come and try to criticize, but I'm trying to say is that if you look even at Jogo, adult education in all these forums, including the COVID response, is normally given the backseat. It is never addressed, even during the responses, that how the institutions are going to be opened. Nobody is asking this question that how are the adult education programs going to be addressed in the wake of COVID? And these people, as Isaac was putting it, are the people who are involved in doing there some of the people we have in our centers are the soldiers, the people we call security guards, who sometimes they come to classes at night. Some of them are housemaids. Here in Nakuru, I remember there was a girl who came to the class, and she only wanted to be taught mathematics because she thought she's beautiful and she can be employed in a bar, but she could not be able to give correct change if she was to give an order. So she came with one intention, that how can I be able to count and give proper change if I am serving a client in a restaurant or in a bar? And this person was trying to have the livelihood. But who cares about these people? These people need also to be addressed. As we are talking about our children going back to school, we need to look at how are we going to ensure that the adults who also make a very bulk, they're the ones who make decisions. When we are talking of the people who are illiterate, we're not talking of the school-going children. We're talking of people who are above the age of 15 years and above. Those ones who do not have the second chance, who should be given a second chance to go back to school. But these people are left out. These are the people who participate in universal suffrage during voting. But some of them are directed on how to make a decision. Some of the decisions they make, even they don't understand them. So as we are having these discussions, let us try to say, if education is all inclusive, how do we ensure that these important segments, also as we go back to school, how are they going to be part and puzzle of the response that we need them? If you look at the issue of COVID-19, it was about hygiene. And hygiene, it is the parents who are also supposed to participate. But we tend to assume that they know everything, which could be true, but are we not ready to give these people also quality education so that they can make informed decisions? I would like also us to center their argument or our discussion on how do we respond to the youths who are out of school and the adults and the people who are marginalized.
Thank you for jumping in, and I think very heated discussions taking place at the moment. I think we'll shelve some of them as we continue with the discussion, but I want to pick up from where Amos left, taking education to the people. Daktari, Amos was very heavy in terms of mentioning issues like the suspension of learning and what it really means. So are we, due to COVID-19, looking at having a perfect recipe for a lifelong crisis?
Yes. I think I wish I had the energy that Amos has. It's very inspiring. He's raising some valid issues, and I think what I would say is that if you look at the Ministry of Education, certainly there are certain strengths and there are certain weaknesses that we have. And some of the strengths, as I mentioned, as you have seen, is the innovative learning methodologies that have come out in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, as a response towards making education more accessible. So I think that would be a positive thing that has come out from the COVID-19 pandemic. But I would also want to say that even the policies that have been developed, the emergency responses, are also positive things that have come out. But on the other hand, we acknowledge that there are certain weaknesses with regard to the vulnerable, the digital divide, issues to do with digital literacy, digital infrastructure, if we are to use some of these innovative methods. But again, we can also look at the opportunities that have come out. Mwema has talked about some of the opportunities that are coming out, where we are seeing new skill gaps that are coming out, new occupations, the gig economy coming out. You have seen the delivery of services, the shortening of the service structures, where now we are jumping the middle persons. I've seen people actually selling their produce from their cars. So a lot of things are happening in the economy. And for me, these present opportunities for us to respond to them in terms of skills development for the youth, out of school youth and the adults. But also the threat that is coming with the slow economy and unemployment are also things that we need to take cognizance of. So I want to say that the picture is not as bad as Amos is pointing out. We do have some strengths, we do have some weaknesses, we have some opportunities, and we have some threats. So I think the issue is, how do we scale up the good things, and how do we take care of the weaknesses that we have?
Asante, Daktari, and for putting this.
Titus, just to respond.
Yeah, I'll wait quickly, Amos.
Yes, I think, thanks, Daktari, but I think you need to remind you about your very, very own statistics from government. We are talking about proportions of those people who have never gone to school in areas such as Kibish, reaching 90%. Those are Kenyans. The worst we can do as a country is to keep on hiding in the mean, the averages, where we talk of the average is, and then forget to ever think about what is this below the average. Because they are Kenyans, they have the right to self-determination. And that's why I agree with the director for Nakuru. We must ask the question, are they less Kenyans or are they Kenyans like other people? If 90% of people in Turkana have never accessed school, over 50% of Kenyans have never been to secondary school. Now, being to secondary school is not even an issue. The issue is even those who have gone past that secondary school don't even have what we are calling functional literacy. So on the bare minimum, we have got 10% of those who are already living class 8 who can barely read or write. So it's again about wasted resources. There is the question of accountability on the resources that we have invested in. And that's why I keep on asking, if you are going to have a proportion, if you are going to have 45,000 Kenyans living Form 4 with a grade E, after 12 years, these people cannot function in life. These people cannot read what they were doing in school. Why would government have spent more than 300,000 as a unit cost to send you to school for 12 years, to come out when you cannot read? Wouldn't we just have opened for you some kiosk somewhere, rather than wasting all these 300,000 and you come out and you still can't read? Those are the valid questions that, Daktari, we are asking. So it's not the question of these a few things that government is doing. Government holds the aspirations of all people. It's not about the majority. If we only speak about the majority, who will speak for this minority? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amos. And I want to agree with the Daktari. We can feel your passion in your tone with regards to how we deliver education in the future. But just to bring us back to perspective, and also in the light of our discussion, we estimate that about 24 million children and youth from primary and tertiary are going to be out of school, and they may not have access to learning when, of course, learning resumes whenever it resumes. So are we looking at losing an entire generation, considering there are also statistics that are telling us even the pre-primary, the kids that were supposed to join? Isaac, do you think we are looking at a generational catastrophe?
You could look at it from many angles. Yesterday, I was looking at a cartoon somewhere where someone is trying to indicate or illustrate a situation whereby two people are arguing on something. But when you are an observer, you can see the two participants are very right. The only thing is that the perspective from the point they stand gives them the reasons to why they should say they are right or they are wrong, or they can point fingers to the other people. One, yes, we could be, but the element we need to capture, and I think I will still go back to what probably Amos has said, we need to start rethinking. The COVID-19 has come to give us an opportunity for us to reorganize quite a lot. I want to mention that before COVID, I think back 2019, I had an opportunity to visit Geneva and some of the technical training institutions. And basically, I wanted to understand the structures which have have been put in place to ensure that we carry everyone on board. And that, like Titus, you're asking, are we creating a catastrophic sort of like gap? And one of the things that was coming out is that under their education system, they have created a structure which even those children Amos is talking about, if they have gotten D or they have gotten E, they can still be valuable. I saw a young girl who has been in primary school. She performed very poorly in secondary school, but the structure allows her to go to a vocational, to be exposed to apprenticeship. And from there, she will do apprentice for around 2 years. Then based on that, the education system allows the report which will come from that particular period or exposure to either join a university. And I was impressed to hear that this girl has discovered a perfume of her own discovery in this company called Feminish in Geneva. Structures which completely allow us to measure on talent, identify talent, grow talent, and not basically going maybe the long way of education. And I'm saying that we have not lost it in our education system. This pandemic has come to give us opportunity to expose everybody and to readjust the way we are doing things. It's not business as usual. Just to mention that the program that we are implementing in Narok and Nakuru County, because we began with the two counties, the adult functional literacy program that we began at a community level, we wanted to ensure that we bring everybody on board. We don't leave anyone behind. And one of the elements that we did is, we ensured that is captured, is to ensure that we have grassroots engagement with the community. This is why we have the likes of the community trainers, the community facilitators represented also in this panel, engaging our community directly. I've seen someone who's saying that the mom can write basic English and Kiswahili, she's elderly, she's wise and smarter. One of the case studies that we picked in our engagement for the last 2 years with the communities from the two counties, there was a very classical example given by one of the community elders, a very strong gatekeeper. And he was saying that initially he could not read and write. And at some stage he was robbed his money from M-Pesa because he could not comprehend his PIN. And so at some stage gave someone to help him withdraw money from an M-Pesa. And this person went ahead to withdraw more. And then this elderly mzee could know. And we are putting structures so then we ensure even the elderly, the adult, and now because we have our education experts and the ministry here, can we conceptualize in terms of the current situation has come up with many opportunities, like Dr. Wanjiru has said. We have the gigs, we have the performing industry, we have quite a lot of opportunities which have come on board. How then can we ensure even the children, as they start the primary, they go to secondary, they go to university, and at the level where we have the elderly who have already gone beyond the secondary school, maybe doing business in a more informal way, or maybe conducting education in an informal way, how do we ensure that all of us, we are reading on the same script for the purpose of moving the country in a common objective? And this is what we need to be conceptualizing as stakeholders. What measures do we need to put in place to support each other and to ensure that we don't leave anyone behind? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I think that was a very insightful discussions, bringing out very clear emotions in terms of how are we managing our education system and how do we move forward. Of course, very clearly came out that we can choose to look at our glass half full or half empty. So I would want us to shift the gear of the discussions perhaps towards a more half full discussion. And to kick us off, Daktari, of course, continuity of learning during this pandemic became a priority of government. And so we had rapid deployment of distance learning solution, and particularly in the formal education of children and young people. I'm sure there are very positive things that are coming out of it. How are we responding as an education system to this crisis?
Yes, thank you, Titus. As I had mentioned earlier, what we are seeing is the rapid integration and adoption of innovative methods of learning. Some were there before COVID, but now they are being increasingly used. For a long time, we have emphasized on the importance of e-learning, distance learning, open and distance flexible learning. But with the coming of COVID, where you now have to transit from face-to-face learning interactions and learning at a distance, we are now seeing the adoption of distance learning, particularly at the higher education levels. And we are hoping that this will trickle down towards the lower levels of education, including adult learning. The advantage of distance learning is that we can leverage on technology so that we use e-learning and reap the benefits of its advantages in terms of it being a very cost-effective method that would allow us to reach wider access. But of course, as I said, there are certain challenges that come with distance learning. The issues of the digital divide, digital tools, infrastructure, digitizing the curriculum, how literate are people in terms of knowing how to use these tools. If we are to use smartphones, how many people have smartphones and so forth. So we have to be very realistic in terms of what we have and how it can take off. But as you are saying, if we look at the glass half full, these are some of the opportunities we can now take off and start using for learning. There are also other methods I've seen. Adult learning should now move towards integrating work-based learning as part of their programs. And I've seen a number of countries, Brazil, USA, Switzerland, are now using virtual apprenticeships and virtual internships so that people can actually do work-based learning from their homes. So there are certain innovative learning methodologies that have come out of this pandemic. And if we start looking forward, there's a promise of us moving forward using these innovations. Thank you.
Asante, and a quick reminder, if you are joining us, this is Kikao Junction, platform by Forum Civ, Hub East and Southern Africa, where we discuss matters that affect our region and come up with locally driven solutions. And I'm following social media. I see quite a number of comments coming up. Some are questions, some are complimentary in terms of how the discussion is being steered. We have Levi Juma, who is asking us, can you kindly expound on the community learning? I think perhaps we can quickly look into that. How is it being done? Where is it happening in Kenya? I think maybe Daktari, you can quickly respond to that, or Dr. Jimford, and then we'll take 2 more questions and then we can elevate the discussion to the next level. Daktari, do you want to take that or do we leave it to Jimford?
Jimford can answer.
Okay, thank you. Jimford, are you with us? Okay, we seem to have lost Jimford, but hopefully when he's back, we can address such issues. Rebecca Supeo is saying, Happy International Literacy Day. Proud of the team for pressing on with the commitment and passion. Very insightful discussions and questions that we need to continue to agitate the system to do better. And she signs off by saying, we are praying for you. Again, we have Atiambo Gillian, who has put her comment in here. She's saying, even access to education itself, the surrounding environment, the availability of training teachers, the immediate need for the family. And then she signs off by saying, the same time, talent of individuals and opportunity to showcase talent. I think quite lovely discussions happening on social media. And so I think to steer the discussion back to track, as experts in providing data on education, I know, Amos, you have alluded into this, but how are we positioned to effectively utilize data to inform adaptive policies and to kickstart education once we are out of this pandemic.
Thank you so much. I know those of us who do advocacy work, we speak a lot about evidence-based decision making or evidence-based policy making. But evidence has also demonstrated that evidence-based advocacy does not work. It could be evidence-informed advocacy. Maybe that will deliver, and will therefore go with three things. One, which is responsible design of the data that we collect. Number two, it has got to do with that gathering of that evidence. And then number three, it has to go with the responsible analysis. So one of the first things that we need to do is to see increased co-creation of the evidence that is coming up. So that government, for instance, doesn't just assume that the kind of data it has is final. But how do we appreciate local realities and contexts? And that's why I mentioned of increasing role of communities, increasing role of counties, increasing role of households in terms of determining what kind of education their children need to get. And civil society actors, collectivizing what you call citizen agency. This agency could be best with the individuals, it could be best with the government officials. Because when I listen to director from Nakuru, there is a lot of agency. He's a government officer who has a lot of agency. So how do we begin to harness such in such a way that it can now help us to confront the problem that we have? Because we must accept that for us to arrive at an education that works for everyone, or rather to ensure that everybody is functionally literate, equity and inclusion is not an afterthought. But equity and inclusion has to be the DNA that guides our planning process. So we cannot design, then later on we ask, oh, what about those children in Mandera? What about those girls with a disability? But we must design on that table with that girl living with a disability in Mandera. Because see what it means. Already, first of all, you are in Mandera, you are disadvantaged. Now add to it, you are a woman who has dropped out of class 6. What opportunities do you have in life? I mean, you're almost condemned. So what do we need to ensure that when we are sitting to discuss education, we discuss it from such a lens, rather than saying that we have now finished designing, we have got Kenya Education Cloud, we have got what and what, now how many people can sign on to it? Then, oh, remember, oh no, those children in Mandera cannot be served by the Kenya Education Cloud. Can we think about giving them radio? And then you realize that there are no signals that side. And then nobody cares about it. But we make sure that equity and inclusion becomes the DNA of how we design. And there is a lot of evidence and there is a lot of innovation that are happening right now. So that what government should be doing, it becomes a repository of how it can harvest what is happening, what are these solutions that are everywhere, but not sitting down and talking down upon people as we have seen over time. In fact, I can tell you that there is a serious deterioration in terms of inclusiveness in policy formulation in the last 5 years in this particular country. If you go to see the session of paper that Mutula Kilonzo developed in 2012 in the ministry, you'll be shocked. I doubt that Kenya has ever had such a comprehensive document. What is the status of implementation? Now we are seeing structures which the ministry and the government itself promised to deliver. It hasn't been able to develop to them. So what can we have in terms of this co-creation of solution, co-creation of the evidence, co-creation of monitoring, so that we have got inclusive solutions that end up to serve many, many people. All means all. The constitution, the people of Kenya voted and said every child. They did not say some children. They did not say some adults. They said all children. And that must be the cardinal point at which we used to design and realize solutions to the current challenges to education. Thank you.
Asante. Isaac, what is your perspective with regards to inclusivity, the digital divide? I think this has come out a lot as part of this discourse.
Thank you, Titus. Let me start by the comment by Rebecca that change is inevitable and we need to embrace it. And she believes that we can handle it. The Kenya population, and Rebecca has been one of the pioneers of the project that we are implementing, the work that we are doing in Nakuru and Narok. And thank you for the support that she has given us. I was saying that you'll agree with me that the knowledge and the level of understanding, whether informally or formal in Kenya, is really increasing day in, day out. And from my perspective, is for the communities or for people whom we are targeting in terms of strengthening their literacy levels or increasing their literacy levels. For such communities to have a meaningful participation with duty bearers or with the government or with service providers, it's very critical for us to have functional literacy systems. That one we cannot avoid it, like Rebecca is saying. Now, we have a scenario whereby, in terms of the attempt to ensure that we increase the literacy levels among our communities, a scenario has come, and we are talking about digital platforms. We are talking about the entire arena of technology. To facilitate such constructive dialogue with duty bearers, I've said, we need now to start mapping out which opportunities fit the particular categories. Amos has tried to attempt to give quite elaborate discussion in terms of the importance of data. We cannot avoid it as well, because we need to understand in every particular community or the category of communities that we are working with or we are addressing the illiteracy issues, at what level are they? What are the demands? What are the needs? What are the capacity gaps which you need to bridge before we start institutionalizing these particular structures? If we are to introduce digital platforms to probably Kisotu, Ole Kisotu, who is deep in the areas of raplands in Nakuru, will he understand this? How can we synthesize or break down this particular technology or components of a digital platform for him to understand, so then he can start dialoguing this, but not to go very far. You know what M-Pesa has done in the world, and specifically in Kenya. Now, we are seeing a trend whereby come to issues to do with the promotion of SMEs, the small macro enterprises, which are largely contributing to highest percentage of our economy. In terms of doing business, we can see trends whereby even financial service providers, they are using digital platforms for people or for entrepreneurs to access financial services. We had a discussion with the Equity Foundation just the other day, and they are talking about supporting or equipping communities or entrepreneurs with the digital literacy support, so then they can access the various platforms which they have created or various opportunities which they have created. How then do we ensure that they plug in, the communities benefit to this? And this cannot only happen if we have constructive dialogue with duty bearers, community members, like Amos has said, and have we map out platforms such as what we are discussing today, the exploitation of digital platforms, and how then the two sides, the duty bearers and also the communities and the beneficiaries, identify these innovative approaches for such context whereby they can benefit, this mutual benefit. And one of the classical examples that I can also give, and Dr. Wanjiru will agree with me, is that last year we had a public-private forum where the public sector and the private sector and also the community represented, we were discussing how then can all the sectors support each other. So then there's no one of the duty bearers or one of the sector players is left behind. There's a lot of positive input that we can get from private sector. We can enjoy elaborate support from the private sector, but they cannot come on board unless we involve them in this kind of dialogue. The public sector, they talk about the government in terms of the ministries, various departments, the county governments, and talk about the community saying these are the challenges we are facing. Let us not prescribe medication to a disease which we don't know what the owner is saying. We need first to diagnose what are the challenges. Then from there we bring the strategic partners who can help us in terms of addressing this. So in terms of digital platform, this is the approach which I think can work for us. I've seen us make some good steps following the discussion that we had in Naivasha. And you remember, Dr. Wanjiru and also Titus, this particular public-private forum was hosted by a public sector player, and this is Oserian Farm. They hosted the meeting. We had quite a number of recommendations given in terms of how all the partners or players in this particular sector can work together and address the issues that we are raising today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think I hear a rallying call for inclusivity. Can we bring everyone on board in the conversation? And often at times we are engaged in these high-level panel discussions, policy-level discussions, but we leave the community behind, who ideally are the ones who are supposed to take up some of these processes. And if they are ever going to be sustainable, then we need to have them on board. I would want to bring Alice to perspective, just to help us understand at community level, the issues of digital. I think digital is what has come out in this discussion a lot. Alice, can you bring us into perspective? What challenges are you anticipating, and is it possible at community level?
Thank you, Titus. In this issue of digital, you know, in my community, it is us who became late in education. For instance, our parents did not go to school. And that's why PPDP decided to bring adult education for them to understand. And for those who say our parents set our school fees, they can have another chance for them to be able to read and write. Okay, this thing has really affected us. Like, for instance, our youngsters, they are now getting pregnant. Maybe they are from class 6, and our parents cannot understand that is not the end of education. So us as instructors, we always talk to them. We tell them a person can give birth and go back to school. He can start from where she left and go beyond where they want. But it is not acceptable in the community. But nowadays, they have seen that change. They have also seen how other communities have gone so far. So they have really changed, and they are adapting to the change of the whole world and also in Kenya.
Thank you, Alice.
Thank you.
Again, bringing out one of the other issues that we had the discussions most recently, talking about the shadow pandemic in teenage pregnancies, among other issues. I think for me, that translates to what is actually the effect at community level. That even when we discuss policies, when we discuss implementation, then how does it touch the nerve of people at community level? And Alice has just brought out some of the things. So I hope we can put that and address it at some point. But I would want again to go back to social media. We have a question here asking, what is the government doing to cushion adult learners in TTCs? I'm assuming this is technical training colleges, which have been left behind by KICD in e-learning that is continuing for primary schools and secondary. So either Jim Ford or Daktari, do you want to respond to that? What is the government doing to cushion adult learners in technical training colleges, which have apparently been left behind by KICD?
Okay. I think if I get it right, the question is about the learners in the technical and vocational education training institutions. Yeah. And if that is the case, then they have also been affected by the same thing that has happened to basic learning education institutions. When COVID came, these institutions were closed. As I said earlier, because the government was responding to preventing transmission of the virus. So the TVETs were also affected by the closure of the institutions. But again, as I also said, the government has put in plans to reopen these institutions and developed guidelines towards opening these institutions. So I think that would be the correct position with regard to those learners.
Okay, thank you. I hope that is clear for you, Margaret, who was asking that question. I think she clarifies under there saying TTCs refers to teachers training colleges, not TVET. Sorry, I think you are muted, Dr.
Yeah, okay, I get. She's talking about the teacher training colleges, the 20 teacher training colleges.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the same fate has also affected them. And again, as I said, they will be opened in due course. We are still, they will be gradually opened as the curve flattens, because that has been the position. Once it flattens, the reopening will take place. So they are also affected.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. I think Jim Ford, welcome back. And of course, educators like you and the adult instructors are at the heart of promoting quality and lifelong learning. So if these instructors are motivated, they are trained adequately and consistently, and also guaranteed decent working conditions, then we are bound to have a more successful delivery of the program. So how then can we position adult instructors in the purview of community learning, which is also something that we are learning to get into? Jim Ford, I think you are muted.
Sorry, I'm not clear.
Yes.
There is a saying that says that if you want to go very far, you go with people. But if you want to go very fast, you go alone. It means that if we want the country to progress and prosper uniformly or in a very homogeneous way, as one of my panelists said, you should not leave some of the people. You should always be with the people. And as you put it, adult education is one of the most disadvantaged kind of directorate that we have, but we have always, it is part of the government. I tend to think one of the major problems we have, and which I will equally share with you, is the number of adult education instructors that we have. In fact, it is so meager that they will not make a lot of changes in the society. And majority of the teachers that we have who are handling adults, big number is part-time instructors. I'm sorry to put across in this kind of forum that these people are only paid 2,000 shillings per month by the government. And when you look at 2,000 shillings per month, this money comes after 6 months because it is put in the normal government expenditures and AIE. So when you are bringing people who are the bulk work, and they are the ones that are going to teach the adults, and they are only being paid 2,000 shillings that they get after 6 months, that tells us that we have a problem in our priority about the vulnerable people in the society. And this one has really affected the running in adult education centers. As we are talking, is that majority of these learners, when the pandemic struck, we closed the institutions, and the communication we have is that they will not be paid as in this financial year, which means that even if the schools were to open tomorrow, then these people are not likely to start work because of the kind of the circular that we have received, that they will not be paid, or we will not have them until the end of the financial year. This one tells us is that when we are making policies, there are various interests at play. There is the policy, there is the process. Then there is the power and there is politics. Politics is the one that controls resources, and power controls resources. Politics is about interest. So if we have the political goodwill that the interest of assisting these people who are the adults who are in adult learning centers, then we can be able to say that we are moving out with everybody. We tend to just give the statistics that this is the number of adults we have who are illiterate. Then what? Sometimes that is the question. As a director, I've asked it myself several times, and I've asked this question in various forums, and unfortunately, sometimes I do not get an answer, because this data is very good, but the data is good in so long as it will be used to inform decision making and policy making. But if you have the data and then you do not use that data for purposes of improving the lives of the people who are affected, then that data is as good as nothing. So what I'm trying to say is that as we are trying to look at the pandemic and how it has affected our learning and those people who are affected, we need to ask ourselves, are we doing the right thing? Are we really concerned about these youths and out of the school adults? Are we going to put resources at their disposal so that we ensure that these people go back to school? That's one of the challenges that as a government, we need to address with finality. And if we do that, then we have this partnership, like the one we have in Suswa and the Rapland in Nakuru and Narok. The centers are vibrant simply because of that partnership. And that's why a lot of people are coming in to support. And that's why you can go to Narok or Suswa and people will talk about how it is changing their life skills. So what I wanted to put across is that as we are discussing this issue is that we should not only talk that we have policies, but the policies are as good as implementation. If this implementation part is not going to translate to actual learning or actual training, it is not going to assist as much. The other thing, as we talked about, I remember in my Nene, Isaac said very well that people in other countries, you can develop talents. Talents can only be developed if we give confidence to the people. If a person is not having the confidence, he cannot discover his talent. If the person is not given that confidence, he cannot pursue his talent. So the education is the panacea that actually builds the confidence, and it is through that confidence that somebody now will start to pursue his dreams. If we deny these people education, then we are killing their dreams and we are killing their talents. So let us try to look collectively. How do we address the vast majority of the Kenyans? As he was putting it very clearly, that it is not about statistics, it is about these are Kenyans. And how are we going to ensure that they get quality education, they get access to education, and they also enjoy the rights as they are spelled in our constitution? Thank you.
Asante, Jimford, and for bringing out also a number of issues that we perhaps may get a chance to look at. One, issues of remuneration, how we are delivering our programs. And I think you ask a very deep question there. Are we doing the right thing? But I just quickly want to go back to an issue that Alice brought to fore, and that is the issue of teenage pregnancies, among other issues that are not being captured as part of the effects of this pandemic. And there's a question on social media. Someone is asking, how are we going to address issues of the girl child on matters of them becoming expectant and education? What measures have we put in place to address issues on these cases when school resume. So again, Jim Ford or Daktari, you want to respond to that? Maybe Daktari?
Yes. Yeah, when I started off, I had mentioned the issue of vulnerable learners. And I remember I said that with the COVID-19 pandemic, their vulnerability has increased. As they go back home, you find that the education sector, the education ecosystem, or school setup, which provides a safety net for some of these vulnerable children or learners, disappears because now they have gone home, and therefore they're exposed to these issues of pregnancies, early marriages, child marriages, gender-based violence, rape, and so forth. So those are the challenges that have come out as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, or rather they have been scaled up because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Remember I told you that we have COVID-19 guidelines that have been developed, and one key aspect in the guidelines is psychosocial support. So there's a very strong element of psychosocial support that is going to be provided because of the COVID-19 negative effects that have come out, especially with regard to vulnerable learners and the negative impacts of the COVID-19 itself. So there will be psychosocial support.
Thank you. I hope probably towards the end we can also somehow share a link to access some of this information that most of our viewers or some of our viewers may not have access to. But as we take the discussion further, I would want us to focus on some of the innovative strategies that we can use to take forward education. I think the discussion so far has sort of agreed we are in this crisis, we are in this real-time and continuous data play a key role in informing adaptation strategies. Are we effectively collecting data, and how can we utilize it?
So thanks, Titus. First of all, I would like to say that the modern day challenge lies with what I have christened called officialization of data. Over time, and COVID is just making it worse, we are beginning to see governments that are encroaching and really making the space of data extremely protected. So you have got governments which have taken over the data space. If you ask Kenyans, what are the comparable numbers of people with the COVID infections? Nobody has the numbers, because now data belongs to government. It's only government which is in a position to tell you what are the infection rates. And so you can have places like Tanzania where a president can wake up and declare that the country is COVID-free. And there's nothing you'll do about it. Now, one of the things that we need to do is to demystify this thing called technology. And there is a myth that is ongoing that technology is the panacea to all our problems. And as I said, I find Jim Ford a very, very progressive government official in his presentation, because he's very, very much alive and telling us as it is. So I want to paint two scenarios to illustrate why technology is a myth and may not be the solution to the current problems that we have. So right now, if you had a meeting which you had planned to take place in one of the top-end hotels in Nairobi, you don't have that meeting, but instead you are going to hold that meeting on StreamYard, or you are going to have it on Zoom. Now, figures are telling us that in the last 3 months, the revenue for Zoom increased by 169%. And therefore, they made an additional $328 million. What does it mean for the Kenyan economy? So it means that that hotel, the bookings it had, the waiters, the food that could have been eaten, the taxi drivers that could have ferried people to that meeting, they have lost an income. But rather, it is now Zoom which has basically collected all this, maybe with a little portion of it going to Safaricom, because Safaricom was the main internet service provider. Now, the other example is we've seen how, for instance, the Kenyan government has invested a lot in terms of adoption and uptake of ICT. So if I give what may look like a political example, we were told that SGR will be a game changer when it arrives in Kenya. And so we spent 328 billion to put up that railway. Now, from the day it was commissioned on 1st of June 2013 or 2014, we really can't see much of a difference in terms of what it has done to the Kenyan economy. So what you're realizing is that technology, for as long as you are the recipient, it doesn't serve you. Technology only serves to those who are flowing into other areas. If you're exporting technology, it is better for you. But if you are a recipient of technology, it is not going to serve you. And therefore, this is the myth that we have to put across. That technology is not going to solve our problems of inequality and our problems of inclusion. In any case, it is just going to excavate all those forms of inequalities that were already existing. So we already have existential threats, existential problems that we must go to address. In this country, and I agree with Jim Ford, there are two problems that we have to confront. One is, how do we destigmatize illiteracy? So that whether it is functional or it is the basic literacy, people who don't know can be comfortable to say that I don't know. But I even see a lot of educated people who are completely illiterate, because every Kenyan believes that they will have an opinion on everything. So even in matters which they are not competent to argue, and I've seen, for instance, someone wants to engage in on a discussion around economics, and this person cannot define what is demand and what is supply. So we want to have an opinion on everything, which is a mere manifestation of another level of illiteracy. So how do we destigmatize that if you are illiterate, you are comfortable to say that I'm illiterate, I don't know, and therefore I cannot engage in this particular conversation? Number two, how do we demystify eloquence that has been overrated? Because in this country, we are beginning to equate leadership with eloquence. If you speak so well, we tell you that actually wewe unatakiwa kuwa mbunge. And I mean, the mere fact that you can articulate issues does not mean that you have got the leadership skills. So how do we take this conversation further so that we go back to the kitchen to understand that what kind of data does this country need for it to move forward? We need to understand that education as it is may even have been overrated in the kind of economic system and economic model that we have right now, because you cannot be spending 27% of the national revenue in the kind of education that you are configured the way it is, where 80% is going towards recurrent expenditure, and even the teachers that you are paying are not happy. I mean, we really can't be having all this money going to the education sector and nobody's happy. What are the outcomes of our education? And that's why I go back to what I said, that it's important that we rethink, that we define education from the outcomes. This is what we want to achieve. What contribution will therefore education have to play in terms of realizing the national aspirations that we have? But otherwise, this kind of black box that we are putting in money, this kind of Bermuda Triangle where it's like ships are going in and coming out and nobody knows exactly what is happening into it. We must go back to the drawing board and ask really ourselves very, very fundamental questions. How do we have an education that is going to work for everyone? Not with the kind of thing that we are having right now.
Thank you very much, Amos. I think challenges of technology, but we are adapting to it. And I think Catherine Hamali seems to agree with you on social media. She says learning should not be restricted to a one-sided model that favors the privileged few. Our policies and practices have to adapt to the context of the learners. Hashtag the digital divide. I think in the middle of the conversation, the statistics, the data, you mentioned the enablers that people need to have the right attitudes, they need to be motivated. I think quite a number of issues, but you asked a critical question that I'd want us to reflect on, and perhaps, Isaac, you may want to weigh in on this. What kind of data do we need to move forward amidst the crisis?
What kind of data do we need to move forward? I wanted to say that there is this popular scholar called William Paul Thurston. He said, Mathematics is not about numbers. Mathematics is about equations. It's not about equations. It's not about computation or algorithms. It is about understanding. I'm just listening to what my colleagues are saying, and also, for example, like what Catherine has said. In terms of what kind of data do we need in positioning ourselves, trying to get it right from the word go, because I can hear everybody saying that we must have a bit of discussions in terms of getting right from the word go. Literacy is often associated with the ability to read and write. I would say that, and maybe that is probably what is in our minds all through, and our viewers the same. However, we need to understand that literacy is also associated with making sense, and to ensure that people engage in anything or everything that we read, write, and even listen, and also even what we talk about. Literacy is about making sense of everything that we engage in, everything that we read, everything that we write, everything that we listen, and everything that we talk about. So like Bob Tablet said, teaching kids to count is fine. It's really fine to teach a kid to count 1, 2, 3, but teaching them what counts is the best. At this level, when you're talking about what kind of data we need, and like I've said, mathematics and numbers is not about plus or minus. We need to ensure that we synthesize this and not to go to that highest level. And like it has been rightly said, we already have the data, we already have the statistics, if I would call, we already have policies in place which needs to be implemented. I've said, COVID-19 pandemic has come to shape or to reshape quite a lot of strategies or applications in terms of how we do things. And so what kind of data do we need? We need to identify data that will give us a clear perspective of what the real beneficiary, that person in the village, that particular person we are targeting, what do they need? What are the challenges facing them? If, for example, today I put them in a class or expose them in any training, either 1 hour or 2 hours, will that help in terms of building their capacity to increase their livelihood? Will that woman be able to put a plate on table? I have in several forums mentioned a classical example also of Narok County, whereby one of the vocational training centers, they sent their students to go for internship when they had just completed the first year of their training program. And they went to, they were lucky enough to get internship opportunities with the SGR when they were constructing the railway line which goes all the way to Suswa. But interestingly, these kids, they are supposed to go to undergo a program which goes probably for 2 or 3 years. But when they went there, after being prepared, just the basic training, and they started the internship with the railways. They never went back. The vocational training centers have said these children got very lucrative jobs at the SGR, and they never came back to continue with the education. The education system we have, the curriculum, for example, that we have designed for the vocational training centers to equip our young people, or even the elders, to venture in terms of how they promote their livelihood. Is it that which addresses the expectations of the people? Is it that which addresses the scenario that we have? Do we need to design, for example, for the vocational training centers, do we need to design a curriculum that is progressive, whereby I can go to the vocational training center and maybe start off with a certificate, which probably goes for either 1 month or 2 months or even 1 year. We are talking about Narok Water County, Narok Water Company, which is saying that please prepare young people. We have 100 opportunities for employment in terms of sewerage management and operationalization. Prepare us and give us young people, around 100 young people whom we can employ us from next year. Do we need to take them through the entire curriculum of 2 years so then they be prepared? Will they be ready? Will they sit comfortably in class? We can only identify such issues if we have the right data. The data we need is that which touches on real issues. Let us now forget about policies. The policies will be an aftermath, will be addressed because already we have the policies. And the Ministry of Education has been very, very, very supportive in this. I would say so because we've worked closely with Dr. Wanjiru and even Mokua from Nakuru, and even the supply of the books they gave us for targeted communities. Quite a lot of information from their end. But how then we can proceed and operationalize this? We need to touch on that which will bring sense to the people that we are targeting, but not to us as policymakers.
Santi, Isaac, I think just trying to also put us into perspective regarding the kind of data we need. And I hear the need for need-driven data that has a practical approach to challenges that people are facing at community level. It's Albert Einstein who said that education is what remains after one has forgotten what they learned in school. Daktari, we are hearing a lot of implore in terms of then how do we use what we have to get what we do not have. So I don't know in terms of from where you sit, how do you see us moving forward in terms of creating that consensus?
Okay, I was keenly listening to that debate of the data, and I just wanted to say that data is extremely important. I know the government collects a lot of data, and one of the policies is that this data should be accessible to the public. The data is used to feed into the policies that are developed, so that now we talk about evidence-based policies. And for these policies to be implemented, we develop strategic plans. And once the strategic plans are developed, they are funded, and then we implement. And I really wanted to say that I know the government has really been demonized in this discussion. And I just felt that it's good to give sometimes a balanced view so that people don't feel discouraged, that perhaps nothing is being done. With regard to adult and continuing education, the government is aware that there's a challenge of access. They have statistics to show that between 2012 and 2017, the enrollment rate was it dropped by about 34%. Again, they noted that there were gender disparities, with more women going for adult learning than men at the ratio of 2:1. They also noted that there were quality issues, which they have documented in their strategic plan. Issues to do with qualified teachers, issues to do with high teacher volunteer turnover, which my colleague was mentioning, issues to do with inadequate learning centers, stigma with adult learners, family responsibilities of the learners competing with the adult learning taking place. So they have been identified. The challenges have been identified, and they have been addressed through the targets that have been set in the strategic plan. So for adult learning, I really wanted to give this out so that people don't feel discouraged that nothing's going on. For access and participation, the government has actually put in a target to establish, rehabilitate, and upgrade and equip the learning centers, and even to link these learning centers to TVET and even offer capitation. So this is in the strategic plan. Again, when it comes to quality and relevance, the issues you have just mentioned with regards to curriculum, there are plans to review the curriculum. Remember, we want to make it competence-based. We also want the curriculum for adults to be accelerated curricula, where people can learn at their pace. If one wants to learn faster than the others, they can move and be assessed and certified. Again, even the issue of ICT integration is in the strategic plan. The issue of in-service training has been catered for in the strategic plan. Additional instructors had been put in, a quality assurance framework, and even advocacy and publicity. So these things are in the strategic plan. It's not that they are not there. And when you have something in a strategic plan, the issue then is we implement what is in the plan. So I think the issue is not as bad as Amos has painted it. Something has been done. Policies are good. We cannot say that you can implement something without a policy. No, you need the data. You need to feed it into the policy. You need to develop the plans and then implement. And that we are doing. So I know policies are in place, plans are in place, implementation is ongoing. And that is where we need to, again, monitor and evaluate and see where we are. And I agree totally with you on the issue of public participation, which the government does in developing their documents. Anything that we do, budgetary, MTF, we involve the public. So public participation has been a key aspect. I'm sure there's criticism that is coming a lot from Amos, but public participation is ongoing. So let's not demonize and discourage people on the ground that nothing is happening. I really want to emphasize that something is happening. And as we move forward, I want to use Kiema's word, that let's look at the glass half full. What are the positives? What can we learn on? What can we scale up? How can we help each other in the challenges that we are facing? If it is the public sector and the partners, how can they come on board to assist us? Because again, knowledge is not confined to one group. How can we work together as a group, as a community, so that we move forward and steer education in the right direction? Thank you.
Thank you, Daktari. I think in terms of demonizing and bashing of the government as per se, but I want us to steer the discussion moving forward as we come closer to the end. We are about 15 minutes or so to the end of our discussion. How then? Because this crisis does not only affect government, it affects my children, it affects your children, and eventually we are living in a global community, so these challenges are bound to even affect how we relate in the future. How do we come together to ensure that we structure a discourse that helps us achieve a common objective? Isaac, I know there are initiatives that are happening through the public-private development partnerships. Can you just put into perspective?
I would be a bit brief because I think a lot has been said. But let me also go back and also demonize other group, so then we don't focus on one area. I think COVID, like I've continuously said, came to prove who we are, and I want now to send my scards to the community. And the entire parenting fraternity, we were caught off guard. We delegated our responsibilities to teachers and now to the government. And now we have a very popular saying of Serikali's idea. When we have this challenge, Serikali's idea. When we have this trouble, even when the food at home is not ready to eat, Serikali's idea. And we have that kind of mentality of waiting for others to do things without even looking at us from our point of view. What have we contributed to this particular scenario? And so this is why we have a lot of issues to do with like teenage pregnancies, because we were never used to take care of our children. We delegated our responsibilities to teachers. And like my brother Amos would say, the bigger role of cross-check was a little bit easier because there were structures in terms of us keeping the ministry and also the education system in check. But now when they come to the family setup, where we are spending the entire the entire period with our children, then we even find it sort of like a burden. I'm happy when Amos is saying that he's spending a lot of time to support the children, and I know there are quite a number of parents who are doing the same, because we understand the responsibilities that we have been given by the fact that we are parents. And so how then do we ensure that we address these issues? We going to grapple with this particular pandemic for quite a long or even short time. It will depend on how fast we are in terms of accepting change, accepting the new environment, and readjusting. So then we can strike a deal in terms of addressing the challenges that are coming along or brought about by COVID-19. And so, as the community, as the parents, what role are we going to play? We need to keep on also reminding our communities through the structures that we have, either through the government, take us through the Rights Way Forward program from CIV, and any other capacity building initiative that is brought about by either the private sector, the civil society, and all the players that we have in terms of development agenda. Then based on that, if we can understand the role of each player, right from the child to the parent, to the community leaders, to the government, to all duty bearers, so to say, and the other players, the private sector. Then it will be a little bit easier to diagnose the problem, have a very clear way forward, and even implement, like Dr. Wanjiru is saying, supporting each other. That's what I can put in perspective.
Isaac, again, pushing the ball back to us. What is your responsibility as a parent, as a stakeholder? Because we all have a role to play in delivering education. So in terms of moving forward, again, as I request each of us to start looking forward. Jimford, I'm hearing issues of enabling the communities to actually uptake some of these processes, including at household level. How do you see the future of adult literacy?
Thank you. What I wanted to say that the future of adult literacy is the future of the world. Why am I saying so? Is that adult education is a shared responsibility. Being a shared responsibility is that there is a role that the government plays, there is a role that the individual learner plays, there is a role that the community plays. So everybody must be involved. Because this, when we talk of the adults, basically we are talking of Kenyans. And these people are engaged. On one hand, this is a parent. On the other hand, could be your uncle. On the other hand, is a community leader. On the other hand, is an elder. On the other hand, it could be a pastor. Because if you go to adult education centers, we have people who have come, because remember when we talk of adults, adults learn when they want. Secondly, the adults are very practical. Adult education is not about theories. Then it is about practicals. He needs an answer, a solution to a problem. So the future of the country depends on that. If there are resources, for example, if I might use land could be constant, but the population is increasing. So an adult needs to be told on how he can use the same land to produce and feed for his family by using the modern technology to produce enough food for his family, using the available resources to make his lives better, using technology as a way of doing business. So when we talk about the future of adult education, we should look at it from a very collective point of view. What adults need to be told is to be enabled, is to be given necessary information. As Mwema was putting it, is that what they want is, how do I get what I want? If you tell him 1 + 1 is 2, that is the figure. What does 2 means to his life? So what the adults need are practical solutions. That's why we are saying that adults are for practical solutions. They don't need to be told things that do not make sense to them, because they have several things to do. So the future is that if all of us are involved, that is the government, the community, and all of us, we say that these are the issues that are challenging us. These are the issues that are facing the society. And this is the best way we can be able to solve the problems we have. Then everybody, or then adult education will make a lot of meaning. Remember, if you look at the issue of education as a whole, as my good friend was putting it in Turkana, you know, there is a vicious circle of poverty, as there is a vicious circle of illiteracy, where the parent did not get enough, did not go to school, is likely, the child is likely not to go to school, and then the vicious circle will continue circling in that home. And the end product is that there will be poverty in the area, and then there will be no transformation. But if we enable the parent to have the education that is functional, he will see the sense and the need of taking the child to school. And he will see that once the child goes to school, he will be able to make informed decisions. Basically, what we are trying to enable the parent or the adult to do in education is to make that informed decision. And the only way you can make that informed decision is to give him information that makes sense or meaning to him. Once he has that information, this adult will use that information to do things independently for himself. So when we are looking at the future, is that we should not spare resources to ensure that any person is given that opportunity to pursue his dream. So adult education, it is giving a second chance to this other person so that he can pursue his dream. Remember, we cannot achieve our dreams at the same time. You can see, like, maybe if I can give an example, Ronald Reagan probably became a president of US at the age of 79. But Obama became a president at the age of 41. Each achieved his dream. Obama at a very early age, and Ronald Reagan at a very old age. So, but the society gave that opportunity to both to pursue their dreams. So adult education is to enable us to give everybody a chance to pursue his dream by providing the necessary environment in which is not stigmatized, in which is given equal resources and opportunity, and is also given the same attention that he requires so that he can be confident enough to pursue his dreams and move forward. That's what I can say that is the future of adult education from now going forward. Thank you.
Sante, Jim Ford. I think in between there, you mentioned the issues of cooperation, how people can come together. But I want to stick to the issue of resources, and I want to bring Alice on board because I know some of the things that the community is contributing to the adult literacy program that they are doing is offering free space for learning. So Alice, as a community, how are we ready to work together with the stakeholders to ensure that you continue delivering adult literacy?
Thank you, Titus. Our community is very prepared for the coming back of adult education since it is stopped due to COVID-19. For instance, in those centers who have huge number of learners, we conducted ourselves as instructors. We can have 2 classes. Maybe there are 20 and our rooms can just have 20 learners. We will have 2 sessions. So that's how we are prepared. Also, since now people have resumed going to churches, we already have those tanks for cleaning water. People can wash their hands. What we really see as a challenge is the sprays. That one, I think the project can help us, or maybe even the county government. I would really love to appreciate PPDP for taking us through the course of adult education. You have really made a change in our community. I've seen many learners appreciating, and we'll hopefully work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. I think it's some of the things that the community can be able to do. They've also set up, I think, some income generating activities to ensure that there is sustained learning as a sustainability approach. But now, Amos, when you are away, we had a ceasefire. We agreed that moving forward, we want to agree, how do we work together? And using this as a cooking pot, what can each one of us bring on board to ensure that the food that is served on the table to feed our children then is in the taste that they would want. And so speaking in that perspective, how can we all bring something on board to ensure that we move forward? Amos, are you with us? Amos, did you get my implore? Okay, I tend to assume Amos is not ignoring the ceasefire, but even as we wait for Amos to fully get back, Daktari, do you want to give us a structure in terms of how then can government as the lead actor in this process bring together stakeholders, and then we can have a bandwagon where we are leaving no one behind?
Yes, to pick up on a point that Kiema had said.
Sorry, Daktari.
Last year we had
Daktari,
a public.
it seems like Amos is also speaking.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yes,
Amos,
sorry, I had muted. So thank you. I've
sorry.
been having challenges with the internet, and I recognize how much time is going.
Yeah, I think Amos has gone off. So Daktari, sorry about that. Perhaps you can pick up from where you left. My apologies.
Yes. I think to pick up on what Kiema had said earlier, last year we had a public-private dialogue where we sat together with the private sector and discussed issues on skills development. And I remember also some time back when ILO was celebrating their 100-year centenary celebrations, we had a national skills conference where we brought in different stakeholders to come together and discuss the issues and the challenges that the government was facing in linking education to industry. So I would say that that same spirit should continue, where government and the public speak to each other, not at each other, but speak to each other, so that we learn from each other. The government learns from the private sector, the industry, from the donor partners, and they also learn from us what we have learned along the way. We speak together and see how we can move forward as a united team. I think that spirit of dialogue is what needs to continue so that we can try to overcome the challenges that we are facing, particularly this major challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you, Daktari, even as I know that the technical team is working to get Amos back on board. But I think in the interest of time, as we come to a wrap, I think I want to open up the session for final comments, but I want to put on board some of the discussions that are happening online. I see Benjamin Obella, I think he's the Director of Adult Education in Narok, and Levi Juma from Youth Alive, who are actually undertaking a process of getting to teach each other on what adult literacy is. And I think this is the true spirit of Kikau Junction, where we provide a platform for people to engage. So even as we ask that we cannot exhaust all the discussions today within the 2 hours, very lively discussions coming up. I know this will continue even on social media. I hope you can follow the handle, Literacy Day 2020. But to do the closing wrap or just to get the closing remarks. So we want to start with Isaac. Please give us your closing remarks. And
thank you so much, Titus. And thank you so much to Alice Jimford, my brother Amos, and Dr. Wanjiru. Yesterday, I was participating in another forum somewhere, and the facilitator was giving an example of a story of two people who kept on arguing, and they were arguing about closing the door, and where they have their house, the place is invested by wild animals. And so they were arguing who should close the door. So one was telling the other one, "I'm not a fool." And then the other one was saying, "I'm not a fool to go and close the door." So what happened is that they never closed the door because the two of them were not fools, and so they slept. So at night, unfortunately, because the doors were not closed, then the hyenas came and they ate the two of them. They lost because they were not fools. The doors can only be closed by those who would agree to go down and close. My point is that we have a responsibility, all of us, as the development partners, the government, the stakeholders, the community, and everybody. We have a role to play. Let us agree to play our role as given to us or as defined to us, and we shall make it and ensure everyone is not left behind or no one is left behind. Thank you so much.
Okay, Alice, your final submission or closing remarks? Alice?
Yes, thank you. What I would really wish is that the adult education to be opened soon, so that my learners can resume classes. They are really eager. Even some are pressing us at home. They are telling us, what if we pay you so that you can come, we can organize, we go to a place, you teach us for only 30 minutes. So my prayer is for us to go back to our centers and we resume our work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we look forward to working together to activate that. Jim Ford?
Thank you. There's a saying that once the door of opportunity closes, another one opens. The pandemic, COVID pandemic, is like it closed doors of opportunities, but it has also opened several doors of opportunity, of innovation. Our way of education should be looked at how best we can use technology where possible to educate our people, and what are the new approaches that the new pedagogies that are going to be used in order to pursue or ensure that those ones who the original dream is not killed by the COVID pandemic.
Asante.
Thank you.
And then finally, we'll have Daktari. I think Amos seems to have jumped off a ship. So can we, then Daktari, and then we can wrap it up.
Okay, thank you. I think my closing remarks, I would want to, there was a question I had seen raised by the UNESCO in their concept, where they had asked, how can we reimagine adult literacy teaching and learning? And I thought that as we move forward, and as we move forward in our dialogue and discussions, I think we need to start thinking about how do we move forward with these new innovative learning approaches that have come up. How do we move forward with e-learning? How do we move forward with integrating work-based learning in adult literacy? How do we talk about virtual apprenticeships, virtual internships, which are coming up now? How do we move again with accelerated learning, which is something we want for the adults? And here I'm talking about out of school youth and adults. How do we move forward with accelerated learning? How do we move forward with competency-based education and training? How do we move forward with recognition of prior learning? How do we move forward with integrating adult learning with TVET? These are the issues that we need to discuss moving forward. Emerging and innovative methodologies that we can use to help improve access to learning, especially now that we have really been beat badly by COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we now come to a close to our discussions. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to appreciate you for choosing to participate. This has been Kikao Junction. As always, we want to ensure that we provide a platform where we can discuss and come up with solutions. So we encourage you to keep the conversations going on social media. And as I conclude, I see Jerry Mothuri saying, education is what remains after one has forgotten what they have learned in school, by Albert Einstein. That is on social media. Levi Juma again saying it has been an interactive session. So I think we will now come to a close. And I would ask that we continue this discussion and look forward to the next discussion on Kikao Junction. Thank you very much, panelists, and the technical team that was working behind the scenes to ensure that we deliver this platform, and also for those of us that are following on social media and the stream. We thank you very much for the support and look forward to future engagements. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.